Hello and welcome to Stretch Goal Cast. This is a special edition of the show. This is what we might call Between Two Ferns with the Stretch Goal Cast team. We have a very special guest today. We are speaking to Cloudjumper. He is the composer and sound designer for Dusk of D.A.W.N, which is a digital collectible card game on Indiegogo right now. The campaign is still going on, and we featured this game a few weeks ago, and Cloudjumper reached out to us after Jared said something about, the sound budget. So we're fortunate to get a message from Cloudjumper, and we decided to ask him on the show and chat with us for a bit. So before we go on, my name is Clinton Ma.
And I am Jared Wurzberger.
I'm Justin Nichols.
And I'm Cloudjumper.
Hey. All right, so Cloudjumper, how should we start this interview? Would you like to just give our viewers a bit of background about yourself? What's your background in music production and video games?
Sure, yeah. So basically, it's sort of bred in because I grew up with parents who were, well, my mom was a dance therapist and my dad had a production studio himself. So I kind of grew up in a very musical context. And, when I was a kid, there was always like the option of actual classical training, but in the end I ended up not really having any, strictly speaking, musical classical training. I just I picked everything up when I was really young, and I had a few incidents where people told me, well, you're just like 5, your hands are way too small, or you can't comprehend it yet. And so I just went into the studio and did it myself. And then I had a pretty long time living in Germany, in Berlin, where I was DJing and I worked as an event manager and sort of got into that scene of music, mostly exploring electronic music at that time. I guess everybody has his rock music phase. I had that in my teens at some point too. So from there, being a kid of our generation, I grew up with games. I've always stuck with games, and it seemed logical to pursue that at some point as a career because people were asking me anyways. I studied IT, and so I had tons of friends who were working on games. I dabbled a little bit in it myself, but I make a better musician than I make programmer. And so, yeah, I ended up doing a few student projects, doing a few projects that never launched because of different reasons, and now I do this more or less for a living. I mean, I do films and TV as well, but I love games more than anything, and scoring games that's just the best thing in the world. What can I say?
That's awesome, man. So I guess So I guess how did you get involved with doing music and sound design for D.A.W.N?
Basically, I know our game designer from university. He was a few years ahead of me, and once he gave a class for students on digital drawing, and I was in that class and got to talk to him afterwards, and yeah, we kept bumping into each other in pubs or whatever, and sort of became acquainted. And then at some point, when I had already moved to Canada, he wrote me an email. It was like, hey, can we Skype? Do you still do music? And I was like, yeah, sure. And then he introduced me to the project, and there was a few other people competing for the position, sort of. But I guess it's it's connections. What can you find better in a team than somebody who you've already worked with, who understands your language, understands what you're talking about. And I mean, he knew about me that I'm a card gamer as well. I played Magic since I I don't know, 6 or something. So
You're in good company.
yeah, well, great. So and then when I heard about what the game is about and what their their mechanics and their idea was, then I was totally up for that.
That's very cool. Very, very cool.
Sorry, guys. Are you getting any distortion?
No.
On the call? Might just be me then.
I just saw like the video feed kind of cut out for a second, but it came back.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Moving along. So from what I've heard from the soundtrack that you've been making so far, it definitely has like that kind of cool, almost like a hint of jazzy cyberpunk feel to it. I guess like, do you have a general approach? What are some references you've had for making the soundtrack to this game?
Yeah, well, so actually, I was looking at a few things. I just Googled cyberpunk and then looked at videos for whatever the video was for and saw what type of sound goes with that, because I was trying to go for a sound that matches the idea of that setting from the community, not from the like, I don't know, any major production product, film, game, whatever. And but I only did that for a very short while, because usually with these projects I really like to go into it fairly clean from the idea of where it's going to go, and then I just do a million of tracks and I play them all back when I'm at a certain point and look through any footage or anything that I have and see what just feels right. From like the style of gaming I've done a lot, I've sort of translated the skill of getting a feel of for atmosphere, because I'm a big RPG gamer, and if the atmosphere in an RPG game doesn't match, then the whole game is like in the dumpster.
Feels off.
So that's usually what I've learned to trust when I do a project like this, and I've had the incredible luck to come up among a few people that wanted to contribute to the soundtrack as well, that I've worked with before. So I kind of clicked with them to not just bring my own sound into it and make it more interesting. And so yeah, I mean, the tracks that we have released yet, there's only 2 featured tracks, I think. But yeah, those 2 people had like a huge part in the development of that track. And as I am playing the game right now, this happens almost every project, but I'm still surprised how well it fits, in my opinion. Like how much it feels like I wanted it to feel, but usually I never expect that to happen.
That's a good sign. That's a good sign.
Yeah, it's cool. It's cool when stuff just is right. I mean, it's hard, and it feels rewarding to know that your work's kind of mixed in, and it kind of makes this massive thing just seem so much better.
Exactly, and it, especially in a genre where you're like, most people that play browser games, especially card games, they will usually turn the sound off after a while, and I'm sort of trying to stir a little bit against that with a soundtrack that is engaging enough to leave it on.
Definitely. I haven't yet had the advantage of playing the game with any music. I've played the non-music versions, and there's definitely something missing. There's this void, and even without the sound effects, it definitely feels lifeless, right? And
exactly, yeah.
When you're talking about card games, so much of the atmosphere and story can be expressed in the cards themselves, but there's that definitely that gap, right? That needs to be crossed. So just wanted to switch gears a bit and ask you about games that you played that you think have really good sound design or really good music composition. What are some of the games that are on your best of list?
Okay, let me see if I can give you like 3 top games or something like that.
Yeah, sure.
So my number one list, in really in terms of how the creator worked with the feeling of the game, would be pretty much almost all of the Silent Hill games. And Akira Yamamoto is an incredible composer, and it's literally been, when I've been playing those games, it's been the sound, even when there was nothing going on, that in the dark room made me throw the gamepad away and be like, I can't play this any longer, this is freaking me out too much. And the subtlety and just the genius in how he made that happen and how it fits everything in the game so well, that's definitely my number one example. For my RPG favorite, I would probably again stick with Japan and go with Final Fantasy. The feeling of that game, even though the soundtracks are sometimes a little, I would say maybe a little too ecstatic, or they're very Japanese, but they're genius in the sense of a Japanese game is supposed to sound like that. So definitely great soundtracks there, especially in the early PlayStation series 7, 8, and 9. The soundtrack was really great, and even in the online versions, since we're just talking about the soundtrack was always good in that as well.
We had a friend, Jared and I, in high school who played To Xanarkin. I think that's from like Final Fantasy X, for like a variety show that our high school had. So, yeah, great music.
We're fans, yeah.
That's definitely the type of track I want to hear at a show like that. Sadly, it happens really rare. And I think the third spot for me would go to a game that was really my first game that I played that really drew me into the world of sound, and that would have been Diablo 2.
Yeah.
That's the first game where, like, the eerie theme of that stuck with me forever, even though it's so simple and in a way repetitive, but
I think it's exactly what you were saying before. It's a perfect mesh of the audio with that gameplay. It's a lonely game, especially if you're not playing with anybody else.
Exactly, and the first time I played that game, I think that's when the inspiration for me to go or to pursue that, to try make a soundtrack for a game came up, because that's just a very different experience than scoring a film or an ad or something like that.
Nice.
So I guess I have a question that wasn't on our list, but I think in case anybody out there is technically minded. So what platform do you use, PC or Mac, and then what software do you use in order to do your composition or your sound effects?
At this point, I stick with PC pretty much. I've worked with Mac before, and I must say, since I'm mostly hanging within a software that's the same everywhere else, it makes no difference for me. I like the versatility of PC. I like to be able to, screw around with things, even though that sometimes is not necessarily for the better outcome. But yeah, and in terms of software, I started out with Propellerhead's Reason. And it is still my go-to place if I have to get something done fast. But then when I'm in the studio, I'll have to use whatever they have, right? If I'm not producing myself, if I'm just working for somebody, or if I have to work with live musicians, depending on where we record, the studio might look different. Usually they have Pro Tools in studios at this point, or Logic. As I developed Performing Live a little more, I went also to check out Ableton Live. So what I use in my home studio mostly is Reason and Ableton Live. Also because I'm a big fan of MIDI controllers. I have, a lot.
Well, that makes sense. You said you're doing DJ work, so that makes sense.
Well, I used to. I don't really do that a lot anymore, but I still produce my own tracks, and I still perform live if I can, if I find the time. And recently, for example, I've gotten an Ableton Push, which I find incredibly fun to play with. It's really that MIDI controllers, in my opinion, aren't really something you need to have. It's just a great toy. it brings a lot of creativity and versatility. Like, you know, it's like all of a sudden you have to play. Remember when the Wii came out, how different that made gameplay to having like a motion sensitive controller all of a sudden. That's how I feel with MIDI controllers. It just puts you in a different world. It makes you do things differently, and in making soundtracks especially, that's an incredibly valuable resource. I do things when I create music that most musicians would never think about. I guess hot wiring game controllers and all that kind of fun things, or recording the most ridiculous sound and, you know, just putting so many effects and so many weird things on it that you can't tell anymore what it is. So it has become an essential part of how I work.
Good
Well,
stuff.
that's awesome. That's awesome.
I wanted to get back to Dusk of D.A.W.N, and as I mentioned at the top of this interview, you guys have about 2 weeks remaining in your Indiegogo campaign, and I just wanted to get your thoughts on what the plans are for the project if you guys don't hit your funding goal.
Yeah, so, well, first of all, you know, for me, the biggest frustration comes from, I know how many people play the game, and I don't see enough people heading back to it. And the development, as far as I can tell, goes like really fast. So at this point, the alpha looks very different. For me, it started becoming fun when the sound was implemented. But then again, I can't play games without sound. So, and ever since then, I actually find myself playing the game almost every day. Not because I'm working on it, but because I want to. But from what I hear from our team, it's that very little people seem to know about it, or the few that do know about it seem to not go and play it. And I see a very high learning curve in this game compared to what's popular on the market right now, and I think that's what's putting people off. And for me, that's really sad, because I'm the type of gamer that I love the old point-and-click adventures. I like figuring stuff out. I don't want everything, you know, pre-digested and handed to me. I want to learn how this game works. I want to have the feeling of getting better at it. But it seems, and that's what we receive from a lot of people that try it out, that they say it's too hard to understand. And that's it's an issue that personally I don't like that's there, but as a development team, of course, we're trying to address that and implement a tutorial and implement a rail to go by. Mm-hmm. For the game itself, I still think we can hit our funding goal. I've seen other campaigns do like a huge jump within the last 6-7 days, sometimes even the last 2 days. So I'm not I haven't given up on that yet at all. I think the game has certainly the potential for that. But if we don't hit our goal, to be honest, I don't have too much say in what happens then, because I'm, just the sound designer. So what the development team then will do, I can only speculate. I suspect that they will either look for somebody to fund it, or for funds in a different direction. I hope that they don't take the way of selling it to a different publisher, although that at this point of development would certainly be not so hard. So the only thing that I hear from the development team is we're certainly determined to bring this game out because the feedback that we get from the few hundred people that play it at this point, or that have actually, well, I don't know how many people played it, but this is the number of people that get back to us and talk about it to us. They are all fascinated and they love the game, so there's no point of return anymore. The point of return has passed. This has to go out.
Okay, that's good to know. It's good that you guys are committed to getting this finished. Just a quick follow-up question then. Are you guys maybe considering a relaunch if the campaign doesn't fund, or perhaps a launch on Kickstarter?
Actually, that's a question that I don't know the answer to. I think so far we have mostly just been focused so much in making the game even smoother and even wider. I mean, as I'm really hyped for the runner feature to come out because I think it's a genius idea and I want to try it out. I want to play it. And there's lots of these little development parts that are coming. That I think we as a team are just too focused on working on the game to consider what we're gonna do if the campaign doesn't go off. I think we're actually at this point all determined that by some magical wonder this will still make it. So we're believing in that, and basically, if that fails, then I think then we will sit together and see, okay, so what do we do now? Do we relaunch? Do we maybe move to a different platform? But at this point, we're all convinced that it is going to work out. So it would be a waste of time for us to work on something that's not necessarily happened yet, instead of putting our work towards, working for the community and making the game even better.
Mm-hmm. That's fair. That's a good attitude to take. You guys will cross that bridge when you get there. So for the time being, you guys are just focused on making the best game possible and just focus on the task at hand. Awesome. Well, do you guys have any other questions for Cloudjumper before we sort of start wrapping things up?
No, I don't think we have any. I don't think I have any questions. Outside of kind of what we talked about, it's been, we're as far as I understand, we're gonna as long as Cloudjumper is still able to, we'll have him for the rest of the show, and we'll continue down our trend, talk about our three main topics. Do we have an order for that?
Well, I'll close up this segment in case we'll kind of like separate it nice and cleanly, and then we can start the show recording proper, I guess.
Sure. I guess one more question for Cloudjumper. Any contact information that you'd like, anything you'd like to add to the show? Any website or anything you'd like to advertise in the segment?
Oh, sure. Yeah. I mean, like, as I am on a public platform here, anybody, like, even though I'm fairly piled with stuff right now for this game, anybody that needs a sound person for any indie project, because I'm digging indie development. I mean, I've done a few bigger titles, but it's nice to have this feel of the scene and to talk to real people, not to corporate people. And there's been so many games that have been made by gamers for gamers that I love more than anything. That's where I'm going now. So if anybody wants to check out like my personal work or contact me for any sound constellation or projects that they think I might be interested to join, they can head over to www.cloudjumper.de. I must say that site is right now under development, and I have to talk to my web designer because she's being a little slow right now, but that happens, and the contact form works, so that's fine. And other than that, I can only say, people play this game. It's for me, it's an amazing game, and we definitely need more feedback, no matter which route we go. but we need people to play and talk to us about it, because otherwise, crowdfunding is a way that is absolutely dependent on the crowd to engage. And so that's what we need right now to make this happen.
Awesome. Well, we're all jazzed about the game. That's a big reason why we have you on the show here. So we'll have all the links to your stuff as well as the Dusk of Dawn campaign and the game itself in the show notes. So I encourage everyone to go check it out and support your indie game development. And so that'll wrap things up for this interview, and just like to thank Cloudjumper once again for joining us.
Oh, actually, there's one more thing I'd like to mention. We recently launched an art challenge with Dusk of Dawn. So basically what we wanted to do is we wanted to give the community a bigger possibility to participate in the game themselves. So right now we actually have a site set up at, I think it's at www.fjordgames.com/art challenge. Or under the Dusk of Dawn section, if you scroll down, it's a little hidden. I don't know why it's built that way, but it's a little hidden. There's an art challenge, and we've put up a few prizes, and we asked people to illustrate a few cards that we've put out. Send in the illustrations, and 10 cards will now be basically fan-made, which we thought is great, because that way we have a little more versatility. And certainly, while I love our designer, there might be somebody out there who's even greater. So why not give that person, the chance to contribute to this?
That's objectivity right there.
The more ideas, the better. It can help.
Awesome. Yeah, that's a great way to get people involved. All right, so that's going to wrap it up for our fireside chat.
And thanks again for being on the segment, Cloudjumpers. It's great.
Yeah, no problem. It was my pleasure. Like I said, I love the indie scene, so whenever I have the choice between being here and being on CNN, I'd rather be here.
Well, then we'll have you on again. It's been great.
Yeah, I've been really impressed by the music in indie games lately. So I totally agree with you that I think, some of the best soundtracks I've listened to, whether it's like movie or AAA games. Indie games have a lot of amazing tracks in them, and great for just when I'm working on a game or something, just to be listening to different soundtracks. That's kind of usually my way to work.
Yeah, it's pretty amazing. I think a lot of the game soundtracks don't get enough credit because of the type of games that are really popular in culture right now are not necessarily soundtrack-heavy games, with a few exceptions. And a lot of people also don't ever take the time to check out the soundtrack separately, unless there is like a huge fuss about it, like it was with Halo and the remix contest about it and all that. But I mean, that's a scale that you can certainly not call indie anymore. And a few things that I really like seeing lately is stuff like the Humble Bundle that came up that give you soundtracks with the game you buy. And I think that's something it really made my heart jump when I saw wow, these people are really getting it. There's sound designers behind this. They're giving them credit. They're exposing them to the gamers. They're giving the gamers also a new way to connect to everybody who works on this game, and to really see oh, cool, so maybe I like the soundtrack. A few of them might even get inspired through that to pursue that themselves, which that's always something really important for me, because I get a lot of questions asked about how do you get into this, what do I need to do I need to be a famous pianist before I can ever go into sound design? And there's so many people out there even in the movie world, like Hans Zimmer, who have no classical background whatsoever, they're just passionate about music, and that's why I love seeing people understanding the musical world that is so big a part of all this.